It is 10:31 on Thursday, August 30th. This is the Town Government Study Committee. I see that we have a quorum, so let's call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda would be the approval of the agenda as written. May I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Terrific. Thank you. Let's see, next item of...
Is somebody taking minutes?
I will be taking the minutes today.
I would take my own notes too if you have a problem.
Okay. Next item of business is the approval of the minutes of July 20th, 2018. Mr. Barnes noticed two typos in them, mainly that he was not included as the members present, and...
We didn't ignore you, Curtis.
Well, you were the one who moved to adjourn, and you weren't.
it was like, so those were the two typos,
No, I
and
was
they have
here the last meeting.
now with Jason.
Oh, not with Jason, no.
May I have were there any other comments or questions on the minutes?
Well, I'll make a motion to approve them with those corrections.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Since I wasn't here.
You can just vote
Thank
because we
you.
don't have enough of you, don't.
All right.
That's all right.
All those in favor?
Off and through.
Aye.
Thanks for having them
Thank you.
created.
Next item under the agenda is public comment, and I see we do have two members from the public. What do you
Go first.
I'll let you two duke it out. Who would?
Don't
You don't.
start.
Okay, I'll go.
All right.
Clifford Williams.
Over there.
Okay. Way over here.
Yeah.
I was here in April. I posed a bunch of questions. I didn't see them reflected in the minutes, so maybe I'm incorrect, but I put them in writing today so that maybe we could
You have a copy?
get them answered. The Article 62 was,
How many copies?
I don't know if it was a mission for this board, or if that's an understanding, yes or no. To find out whether or not, I think my question was, why was Article 62 illegal, or how can it be restructured to make it legal? Why did the town attorney say it was illegal when we had the overview during the article previews?
So you met with him, or you're the...
Well, you know, it comes to
sponsored it?
the FinCom, and he says, he goes over the articles, and he says, so he didn't say it was illegal, he said he just wanted to know more about how the charter was going to be, or the committee was going to be formed, and that information was sent to them.
Could I ask you, did the sponsor, do you know, meet with town council when council was available?
No.
No. This was after that. Let me add some more to this. We didn't find out until like the morning of town meeting that this was not going to be a legal format to put it in. So Andrew and I ran through town council and rewrote it so it could be voted on at town meeting. And it took that format for whatever reason. It does nothing, it's above our pay grade, but that's what town council said, and that's why we didn't want it to be banged out, to have a discussion about it, give you and Teresa a chance to talk about it. So we rewrote it, so he said it could go forward and be discussed, and it wasn't in a legal format, or I don't know if it was because of funding or whatever, but that isn't something we dealt with as to why it was done, or why it was illegal, or anything else. So the first two questions we can't answer. I just know that it came to us that morning, because I checked, and they said, no, it can't go forward. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? And he said, rewrite it this way, and it was done right then and there on the fly. So you could discuss it, and we could vote on it as a sense of the meeting, I think, as opposed to not being able to do anything.
Right, so
all I
that
remember.
goes back to the same old question of why, when the town attorney reviewed it with the finance
Sure.
committee, it wasn't.
Well, you gotta
It
ask
wasn't.
them.
Right, exactly. Well, okay, so then I guess this is the biggest question I have. When it comes to the charter, is that this committee has been given, maybe I'm wrong, the task of determining charter changes, or, and it's part of these questions here, who decides whether or not articles are illegal or not? I mean,
Not
other
us.
than, okay, so then should the article just go through town meeting and be voted on, and then go up to the state and they
No.
decide?
Because they'll kick it out. Attorney General will kick it out.
Well, the Attorney General makes the decision then.
No, we do it before they go to vote. We
But-
don't vote on stuff that
But-
doesn't make
but-
any sense.
But he does.
I assume that all the articles are vetted by town council
Yes.
to make sure that they're in the proper form, contact, and that there aren't conflicts within the charter. So I feel like a lot of these questions should be answered by town council, and
Right.
they can give us a reason as to
What happened?
what happened and why it happened that way.
Problem is that what messed
But they
them up
didn't.
is that it didn't come until like
Until
the
the
morning
11th
of.
hour, okay.
And that was
Well,
not,
that's not
appropriate.
good, no.
Well, the
That
thing
should have
about it
come
is the
into that a long
chart,
time.
the actual article was written just, you know, it was almost like a lawyer doing a title change. It was just, you know, the names were changed to protect the innocent, and, you know, the format's boilerplate, and it was done the same way. So
Yep.
to be legally written, I don't think it was, because it was just taken out of another charter change. So anyway, so.
But whatever.
Who,
Beyond us.
okay, then that's, I guess that's the answer, that this committee doesn't do that.
No.
And under the charter, should the town retain a lawyer for a citizen that has come to, I guess, an impasse, or is a citizen required to retain counsel themselves?
You're talking about the ombudsman thing again?
Well, no, just in general. I mean, I've had problems with the town where I guess I've retained an attorney. Last night, we were at the, it was last night before, the zoning board of appeals, and they retained an attorney. When 700 people show up, or 240 people retain a lawyer, shouldn't the charter or the town be retaining a lawyer for you? Because you represent the town of Nantucket and the citizens of Nantucket, and when there's that many people have a problem, why should they have to pay for counsel?
Because
So is the
they're the
charter
ones with
not
the
written, so is the, well, that's the part of the questions you have to answer. So is the charter not written that way?
No.
That you represent the town of Nantucket and the citizens of Nantucket?
Not when a citizen has a problem with the town, no.
Okay, then
But
that's
if
all I
the
need.
citizen
I
doesn't
just
have a
need-
problem with the town, they don't hire an attorney. But if there are 280 people on that list that are paying his expenses
Right.
because they want to sue the town one way or the
No,
other.
they don't necessarily want to sue the town, they
That's
just want
exactly
answers.
what's going to happen.
Okay, they want answers from the
But in order to do
town.
that, it's not the town's responsibility to pay for a citizen's attorney who has a problem with the town. The town pays for its own attorney to talk to their attorney.
Okay, but when you're dealing, when I'm dealing with, when you say the town, we have different entities of the town. We have, for instance, the building department that doesn't answer to town administration.
Yes, they do.
So, well, they don't. The boss is the state. So it just becomes really confusing. And for a
No,
citizen.
I understand.
No,
And when a citizen-
administratively, they all answer to the town.
Well, they haven't done a very.
Code compliance, no.
Then they haven't done a very good job. So what do we do as a citizen who is limited in resources? I mean, this is what I think I've spoken about
This is
before.
what started the article.
This is what big corporations do. You can't afford to fight the government. You can't afford to fight ExxonMobil. So we have a charter that represents the people. So at what capacity does it represent the people?
It sets up the operating format for a town, both the county and the town. Bill can probably answer that better than anybody.
So that's all the answers I need. So that's why we try to do a charter amendment, so that we had somebody that can come in and mediate, because people can't afford these expenses. So if we have a town administration that, say for whatever reason, doesn't want to follow the law, or whatever the argument might be, what reasons do you have as a citizen? You have none.
It's a good overall question to see
Yes.
what the checks and balances are, and it's something we need to look at.
Well, we asked her, Lauren, on the phone. We spent a lot of time talking about it, like, 2 or 3 months ago, with Lauren on the speakerphone. And she says generally that's not done. And she wasn't sure how we affect it. And we still pursued the conversation. So it's not a dead
No.
issue, but she didn't see it as a productive way or a possible way to do
Or not
this.
as easy as we think.
Yeah,
That's
not as easy as we think.
the phrase that she used was unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And so that I think is the concern that we would have moving forward. And again, not to say that this issue is off the table by any stretch of the imagination, but that if we do wind up going forward with something, that it needs to be
Funded.
and examined properly so that it doesn't create more problems than it's meant to solve. That's.
Oh, well,
that's all.
anything should be vetted that way,
Yeah.
but my point is, we have a charter, and the way I understand it is, the charter represents the people of the town of Nantucket. It doesn't represent, say, some rogue employee for the town of Nantucket.
It
So
doesn't represent
when the rogue
anyone.
employee breaks the law, and you believe he's breaking the law, and you go to town administration, I shouldn't have to hire a lawyer to fight with town administration. There should be some sort of a system in place where we can get a legal remedy without everybody dumping their money in a court system, which is just an absolute waste of everybody's time. Because I've been to all the courts, and I won't give you my opinion
No-
about
no
lawyers
arguments
and
here.
courts. It's just,
No.
if you want justice, don't go to the courthouse. It's a waste of your money. So That's why we have this charter, but I guess I'm trying to find out from your opinion is then, Linda's telling me that this charter doesn't represent the citizens of the town of Nantucket.
It represents the structure of town government.
Okay, then that's it, then. It doesn't
That's it.
represent the people.
The town government represents the people, but it's not individually written for you or me or anybody at this table.
Well, okay, but 700 people just showed up at the gymnasium, so why did they have to hire a lawyer?
Because they're fighting something. The town isn't
We
going to
shouldn't
pay
have
to fight
to, we
itself.
shouldn't have to fight. I shouldn't have to pay a lawyer to fight their lawyer.
Yes, you
I
should
shouldn't
have.
to. No, you shouldn't.
In that situation,
You should be
yes.
civilized citizens. It's called a charter. It's called government. That's my opinion.
They're appealing a
So I just
decision.
need to know these answers so we can form another group of people like we just did at the high school to say, hey, this isn't the form of government we should have. We shouldn't be all fighting each other if we're on the same page, right?
They're
We're all
not
fighting
on
for
the same, Clifford, they're
We
not on the
are.
same page.
Stop. All right,
fighting against
you've
the
lost you've lost the concept of what I'm trying to tell
I
you.
know what you're trying to do, and I agree
As
with you.
an individual citizen in the town of Nantucket, when you are egregiously treated where, exactly where my sister was,
Right.
you shouldn't have to go spend $75,000, $100,000 on a lawyer.
Correct. That's not
Absolutely.
that situation on Tuesday, or whatever it was at
Yeah.
all.
Let's-
They're fighting an
let's-
actual legal decision, and they need their own attorney.
Let's move on. So we will have, we know how to get in touch with you.
Perfect.
Yes, we do.
So we will I will check with the town council with some of this and get back to you on others that we have.
Perfect.
As best we can, and we'll figure out what we can do about, for lack of a better term, the ombudsman. You know, but I think mediator, whatever.
Yeah.
To see and sort of what that would look like if other towns have done it and what a possible solution could be.
Okay.
Because those are everyday decisions that affected him negatively.
Oh, yeah.
And affected Teresa, but they're not legal decisions from a zoning
It's
board,
a
a
s-
planning board, or Concom. That is a totally different issue.
It's a strange area, and it does need to be vetted.
But there's
Oh, absolutely.
there's no way for him or Teresa or anybody else to have a conversation with the other side to try to solve a dispute over a decision that's not a legal decision like the ZBA, the Concom,
And I
the planning board.
think that's
They
the,
run through that every day.
I think that's the challenge,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out what we can do to make the process easier for the citizens.
Correct.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff.
Gotta go fight crime.
Always.
I thought you solved that problem.
Now there's a lot of crime out there.
Anyone else from the public?
Yes.
Thank you. For the record, could you just announce your name?
Yes, my name's Phil Novak.
Thank you, sir.
You said Phil what?
Philip Novak, N-O-W-A-K. My wife and I have been summer residents of Wisconsin for about 40 years now. We're from Washington, D.C. And I got in touch with John because I was I'm a member of the Nantucket Advisory Committee, and Libby spoke.
Oh, non-voting.
No, not the non-voting. This is it's the Nantucket Advisory Committee.
What is that?
Which is a private, non-governmental committee.
Okay.
And my wife and I have come in contact with the HDC, both in terms of seeking approval for restoration of a house in Wisconsin, but also opposing construction of a shed and hardscaping across the street from the house.
You're on New Street?
Yes. Yes, we.
You were at the selectmen's meeting on last Wednesday.
Pardon me?
You were at the selectmen's meeting on that shed.
Yes. We ultimately ended up appealing the decision to the HDC to the select board, which raises an issue that I would at least like to mention. But I guess the question I have is we have real concerns with the way the HDC operates, the way it has operated in this situation, but more generally the way it operates, and we were looking for ways in which we could attempt to address those issues, or at least to raise those issues. And I don't know whether this is the right committee in which to do it. We did it through the process of appealing the HDC's rulings to the select board. Those rulings were affirmed at the select board. We're now considering whether to appeal those to the Superior Court. I can put in writing, if it would be helpful to this committee, and I don't want to necessarily take your time if this is not within your purview, but there's sort of, I guess, four areas. First of all, the code requires notification to the public, not to the public, to interested parties, of construction or development in their neighborhood. Code section 124-12.
If it's in the old, just so you know who I am.
Right,
I was 20 years on the HDC and the chairman.
right,
I did not have anything to do with that particular project.
right.
But there is no requirement, if you're outside the old historic districts, and I believe that is by 200 feet, there is no requirement if that shed was under 1,000 square feet. If they are in the two old historic districts, Sconset Old Historic District and town, if it's over 100 square feet, you get notice. Only the direct abutters, not within 300 feet like the other two notify you.
Well-
Only the ones that actually touch that lot get notified.
Okay, well, let me, we got notice, we got certified notice.
Because you're right across the street.
We're right across the street.
Yeah.
So we got certified notice, we were an interested party, we were entitled to participate. From a general perspective, I can deal with the details if you want. We don't feel that the HDC abides by the notice requirement in a reasonable way to allow interested parties to express their views. If Linda was at that meeting, in one instance, the application was revised to about 2 hours before the HDC meeting and was approved. And if Linda was at that meeting, she heard John Hedden say that the requirements that the HDC has adopted for notice and filing applications and meeting deadlines is really meaningless. They do what they want, it's for staff purposes. And the bottom line is, and again, I can give you the details, the bottom line is we're concerned because interested parties like ourselves don't have an opportunity, a reasonable opportunity. We're not saying we have to be notified of everything all the time, but clearly the experience we had provided no reasonable opportunity. We went to a Sconset Advisory Board meeting the day before the HDC meeting and saw plans that differed, and it actually achieved what we wanted. I was on a plane to Washington. The plans were changed 2 hours before the HDC meeting the next day, and they were approved as changed. So in any event, broadly, I can give you the details. The concern is with the procedures and the opportunity for interested parties. Secondly, is the manner in which they make their decisions. And again, to be brief, again, if Linda was at that meeting, at least two of the select board members said part of the problem they were having with the appeal is there are no findings, there's no notice, there's no indication by the HDC as to how they made the decision, why they made the decision, on what grounds they made the decision. And I think Matt Fee and at least one of the other board members essentially instructed the HDC to begin providing that information. But in any event, that's an issue. The third issue that I think needs to be addressed is when we appealed the rulings of the HDC to the select board, Erica Moody said that they'd have to schedule them so they can bring in town council to represent the select board. And so town council was at the hearing. And he stood up and spoke, and after he spoke, I stood up and I said to the selectman, it sounded like he was representing the HDC and not the select board. And no one said anything. And subsequent to that, the hearing last Wednesday, we've determined that in fact town council is the lawyer who represents the HDC. So we were appealing HDC rulings to the select board, which was being represented and advised on how to decide the appeals by the attorney who represents the HDC. Which is I'm a lawyer, but I think I can say that, people who aren't lawyers can think that probably isn't fair, isn't and isn't the correct way to proceed. So that is an issue that we are going to be raising with the select board, and I think we'll maybe raising on appeal. But I think that's again an issue that, as I understand it from our local council, who's not involved in the proceeding, is that the town council not only represents the select board, but represents all of the agencies, boards, and commissions with the exception of the land council. And it seems to us that it's just highly improper for parties to go to the HDC, have negative rulings, go to the select board for an appeal, and have the HDC attorney telling the select board how to decide those appeals. And so again, I don't know whether this is part of your purview, but this is something that more generally, beyond our own particular circumstance is something that we feel is extremely improper, unfair, and needs to be addressed.
Let me give you some history right there, because Bill would remember, probably Alan would remember, when we were going through this town council part of this charter, because all three of us were on the charter commission 20 years ago now, 25 years ago. I brought this up about town council representing the selectmen or representing the HDC on these appeals. We are one of the only ones, if not the only one in the state, where our act is so old compared to all the other HDC acts that it was set up for the appeal to go from the HDC to the selectmen and then to Superior Court. Nobody else does that. A lot of other places will have mediators, which is what I wanted to bring up when we actually get to the HDC. It would require a change in the act at the state level, not here. The selectmen can't change the process, the HDC can't change the process. We can't change the process in the charter because it's in the 1955 and revised act in 1970 and subsequent revisions. At the state level, it would require a home rule petition. We had it all written out. A couple of us had redrafted the entire HDC legislation because there were so many typos, wrong names, wrong everything in it. And that's not off the table yet, but we have a revised edition that would take it away from the selectmen. So the town council would have to represent the HDC in an appeal, and a mediator would do it like other towns. So that's above our pay grade. Some of the other stuff is how they reason is not within our jurisdiction. That's under the Act. It's all prescribed in the Act. If you haven't read the HDC Act, it's like
I've read it many times.
gobbledygook, as you know, and
Yep,
needs fixing.
yep.
But that's not something we can't change the Act. We can recommend that we fix it, and we've already
That's
had
exactly right.
a draft that fixes the whole damn thing. But some of this stuff we can't get involved with. The issue of public notice was a local thing. Because somebody stood up, 15 years ago and said, I didn't know that this house is being built next to me. Why didn't I know? Because there was no notification at all. And so we voted on it at town meeting, and that's where it ended up. That, I think, we can mutate locally as to how the public notification works and what they have to
Because that
say.
was a local
ahead.
town meeting
That was a
vote.
local town meeting.
Rick,
Just
please.
to clarify one thing, at least in my mind, I think there are different issues here. The appeal process prescribed by the
Terrible.
HDC charter is one thing. Whether the town chooses to have one council representing both parties or a separate council representing them is an administrative decision, probably is exercised by the town manager. It's certainly within her prerogative to either require or recommend separate council represent those two boards right now without any change to the charter. So we're
Correct.
clear. Okay.
Because I brought this up at the HDC multiple times, that we would go to the Board of Selectmen, and generally speaking, they didn't represent the HDC. They represented the Board of Selectmen against a decision of an HDC, whether it's a positive or negative decision. We have asked many times at administrative meetings, organizational meetings over the 20 years I was on, to ask administration to have our own representation as an HDC at all these appeals. We don't get appealed very often, once every 6 months or something. We never see a lot of appeals. This is the first one I've seen for quite some time. The issue still is for the HDC, and I'm not on it anymore, but the issue still is for the HDC, that we don't have our own counsel on these appeals, and we want our own counsel on these appeals. And when the charter was first done, I brought that up. Because of the way the HDC Act was put in decades ago, it's stupid. We don't have any right to our own attorney. There is some language, Bill, if you remember, and Alan, that was in there about legal representation. And I haven't looked at that section for a while, but that section could be mutated, that in cases of the HDC appeals, without a change in the act, to change the appeal process like every other town, HDC should be entitled to their own attorney on appeals before the selectmen. That we can do.
Let me ask, when you're talking about charter, I've looked at the HDC Act, I guess it is, and I looked at the charter with respect to notice, is there someplace else, I shouldn't say charter, I guess it's the Nantucket Code, is there someplace else that I ought to look to see what you're talking about, the charter that provides for the select board to be represented by town council while?
No.
No,
It could be in the charter, but we
Okay, so there's nothing
discussed it.
besides the law.
We discussed
and
it
the
20
code.
years ago.
The-
That's a town policy issue, which we brought up multiple times as an HDC.
But what you're saying is the HDC Act then is something that has to be changed on the state level?
Yeah, that's a home rule petition. I've got a whole redraft of it. You can always email me and I'll send it to you.
Okay, I'd be interested in that. I mean, is there some way, let's put it this way, putting aside our appeal, is there some way that I can help? Is there some way that we can request, or get people to request that there be a change for home rule or something? I mean, I don't,
Well-
I'm looking for advice, and you don't have to give it to me now, but I would
No,
like
I-
to be
It's town
of
meeting.
constructive help to this committee.
So I think the idea is that we have, sort of the mission before us is changing the charter, but we also have heard from citizens, town officials, et cetera, about other issues that are percolating within the town. And so I think as part of our presentation to the select board, ultimately, we're going to be giving them recommendations as well that are not necessarily going to be charter changes, but say, hey, you may want to consider revising the HDC Act, et cetera. Things that are, again, not necessarily within the town charter, but suggestions we've heard and recommendations that we can make sort of on a, not quite personnel level, but say, hey, the town manager should be empowered to be able to request or recommend having different counsel should an appeal come up.
Well, we can also go to, 10 people can sign a petition to bring it before town meeting. Citizens warrant articles have to be in by, I think, the second or third week of November.
Yeah.
It could also come in through the selectmen. We tried that, they wouldn't put it in. So what I want you to do is have a conversation with people who live here, who are like-minded, who think that the HCC Act needs to be changed, and give me your email, and I'll send you what we've come up with so far. You're an attorney, you can read that. And you can get 10 voters, usually suggest 20, in case some are not real voters, to do a petition, and I've got the language in the warrant already made, because we tried it some years ago, and put it in. And it changed the appeal process, and it changed some of the other squirrely things, deadlines that can't be met, and things that just don't work here, because some of it's logistical. So I can send that to you, and you can take a look at it.
I'd be very interested in it. But as again, I'm asking.
But it's separate from
The charter and the
this.
HDC Act are two different things.
Two different things.
Okay.
Rick?
just to be, so you understand, going to town meeting to change the charter of the HDC and through a home rule petition to go to the state to do that is
Not
no
an
big
easy
deal.
process.
But it's easy enough to file the article for town meeting. That's a piece of cake. It's getting it through and done up there and all that. So it's likely to take a long time. I would just, my own recommendation to you, you asked for it, would be that just on the question of council representation, is to ask to get on the the select board agenda specifically for this issue, and they ought to let you on, i.e. the administration, but if they don't, go to the select board members, say, this is an important issue, I want to talk to you about it. And again, they ought to let it on. If they don't,
Public
you've got an
comment.
interesting letter to the editor, and I think you put it to them, that it's not appropriate to have the same council because there can be differences and so on. And see where you get. You may not get any place, but it makes them think about it, so.
You
that's-
can also stand up.
Public comment.
Public
anyway
comment.
at the
Exactly.
board meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're better to get on the agenda, but you
Yeah.
could do public comment.
Yeah.
But
they
in
have to
public
vote on
comment, they don't
something.
respond to,
Yeah.
so,
You can raise the issue anytime you want under public comment, but in order for them to vote to have HCC be represented by separate council and paid from by the legal budget of the town, which was one of the concerns why we didn't have our own council way back. That's when you get on the agenda, because they can't vote on something in public comment, but you can raise the issue under public comment and then have it, and ask to be put on a subsequent agenda.
Okay. Okay.
would it be useful just to mention that the charter envisions the town manager has the responsibility for managing litigation. And we did foresee the question of, for example, the HDC getting in litigation where the town and the HDC are on opposing sides in the litigation, and gave the town entity, HDC, the power to select their own counsel in that case, and to have that, say, the HDC's counsel paid for out of the same budget as the town council. So that's in there.
I thought
We
that
did not
had that in
provide for HDC, for example, getting its own counsel when they're simply at the administrative proceeding in the select board.
Bill, what section are you referring to, so we can look?
Yeah, I
It's,
knew, because I knew there was something in there.
Section 4.2, D10, D in parentheses, 10 in parentheses.
Okay. I knew I
Is that,
thought
is that the charter?
That's the
Yes.
charter,
Yep,
that's
I knew
the
I thought I
town
found it.
charter.
I assume I can just pull that up on the web.
Yep,
Yep.
yeah, I thought, I thought I put that in.
Okay.
So it says simply, in the event that a board, council, and so forth is a party defendant to litigation and the town a party plaintiff, that board may vote to be represented by special counsel funded from the same appropriation as town council would otherwise be.
Town's not the plaintiff in this
You
example.
know, and if you're just at the, in presentation to the select board, you're not in litigation, so it doesn't apply. It could be expanded to cover any concerns your committee has.
Right. It's a great idea.
Remember, if you remember, Bill, I was really hot on that at the time.
But
And we
it
just, that's as far as we could go.
That was, well,
At the
it's a
time.
narrow addressing of part of the problem that Philip is raising.
And another issue is that when we were all separate departments, before we were all combined,
Plus,
nobody has their own, even other departments outside of Plus, nobody has their own legal budget anymore. We all used to have our own line items for legal representation, which we controlled individually as a department. And when they started combining departments and changing titles and stuff, no one has their own legal budget. It's all coming out of the general legal budget, which is controlled by town administration. That's why we haven't gotten too far with the HDC having our own attorney. So it's something that really needs to be discussed. But as I say, appeals from HDC decisions are few and far between. I think in the 20 years, I saw maybe 20. And you didn't see that many. We had a
Well, I
spat
don't
there
know,
for a
during
little
my
while.
time, I would guess we had 10,
Yeah.
just in my time alone.
Because before that, we
Some
got
of them were
9.
extremely contentious.
Shit.
Yeah.
But then before that, we hadn't gotten any, and we haven't gotten many since then. So it varies depending on the types of projects and neighbors and stuff like that.
It sounds like the two of you have had, obviously, I know you've had a lot of experience with the HDC. And I don't know whether this, again, deals with a change in the charter, but we've observed the ongoing activities of the HDC. And as a resident of Wisconsin, we're concerned about the historic fabric of Wisconsin, as well as the island in general. And with all due respect, at least the current board, it's a totally ineffective commission. It's a joke. I'll take about 2 seconds to. We are opposing the construction of the shed 27 feet above street level across the street, 10 feet from the property line.
Right on New Street.
And we were seeking permission to restore Flat Top, which is a little house across the street, which started off as a stable and then become a house. And so we're restoring it. The only thing we're adding is a porch and a outside shower. And the architect thought that since in the old days they had a stable, if they had any heat, we wanted a fireplace, but the fireplace isn't going to work. They would have had heat with a stovepipe out of the stable. So we thought it'd be really neat to put an old stovepipe on. So the short of it is, we've had to go through meeting after meeting, and now we finally got approval, but we have to come back before we put the stovepipe in to get approval for the diameter, the height, and the top of the stovepipe. And the shed across the street, you can drive down New Street and take a look at the shed now, even where is unbelievable. And no comment, 5-zip. Shed's approved. And the other thing I don't want to get going on is Linda heard our argument. The applicant basically filed false and misleading information 3 times with the board, under oath and in violation of the statute, saying he was going to put all of this screening on town property, knowing he had no permission to put it on. And the board, when he admits, I lied to you, the board said, well, that's okay, modify your... So in any event, the more broad issue is there, and this is way down the line, but is there a way to come up with an entity that is really concerned with the things that affect the historic fabric and what should be done and what shouldn't be done, and Linda's shaking her head, no, maybe it isn't. But
It's a subjective, an unbelievably subjective process, because you're dealing with design criteria and things like that. No HDC is any better than the sitting board at that time. We've had anal retentive boards. We happen right now to have go with God boards. We've had boards that hold people's feet to the fire reasonably, which is why we didn't get a lot of appeals for certain periods of time. We've got members that can't read plans. We have members that can read plans. It is an incredibly subjective process. It's designed to be subjective because you're dealing with design, which can be anybody's idea of a design. And we have guidelines in the building with Nantucket in mind. It's built that way here and every other HDC in the state, because you can't have strict requirements, because it just doesn't work, because every situation, every lot is different. There's no precedent.
Right.
Every lot is different.
Right.
But the policy as to what they approve, small structures on the street side instead of behind the building, that was a long-held policy, and that's being departed from in multiple cases now. But it's a subjective process, and we can't legislate subjectivity or intelligence or the ability to read a plan.
Well, the quick response to me is elect 5 different people, to the board. So, I mean, I know what the response is, but the question I have is, should it be an elected board? Should it be a board that...
Don't start that.
All right, okay.
I defeated that
We were doing
before.
well.
All right. Well, if I can give you my email, I've taken too much of your time already. If you would like something in writing, short, a page or something,
That would be wonderful if you don't mind.
that I
And you
can
can email
put
it.
together for you and submit to the committee.
What's your email?
Just a thought.
Yeah.
At one stage, when I was more concerned about all the regulatory agency plus, I guess is the category now, I was thinking that it might be useful for the selectmen, just as they do when there's other issues in town, get a consultant in and do an audit of all the regulatory agencies to see whether they're really conforming with their regs, meeting public needs, all the kind of criteria you'd think to
Yeah,
raise
that's
in
an interesting one.
that kind of
For those who have more institutional knowledge than I do, has that ever been done before here?
not
No.
that I know.
Okay, I mean, it's a really fascinating idea.
Collectively, we go back to about 1900.
CZARIN.
Sorry.
Yes, Billy Hunter gave me that name, because I was a zoning administrator for 25 years, so it was...
I missed that. Was that something that would be helpful to me? I'm sorry.
Oh, we were just talking about it may be worthwhile asking the town to do an audit of the regulatory boards
Oh.
to see if they're actually abiding by the statutes, codes, et cetera.
This
So,
They
seems
can't
to me
tell
that's
elected boards
related
what
to
to
the
do.
enforcement issue.
that as well,
Right?
yeah.
So,
But they can't
you
tell
either
elected boards
enforce the
Right.
regulations or
Right.
you don't.
Ever.
Abiding is a little different, but anyway.
And the HCC is not abiding by anything but the act.
That's what they do.
Building and plumbing.
They've got a little...
Oh, I'm sure.
Dimension.
I'm sure.
Phil, anything else?
No,
All right,
just thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Then you can get a hold of me, and Bill knows how to get a hold of me if I can be of further support.
Wonderful.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, seeing as there are no other members...
Can I just make one follow-up?
of
comment?
course,
It
please.
seemed to me that part of Phil's issue was in some ways related to Cliff's issue of how you sort of appeal judgments that you're not happy with. In this case, representation. And there are lots of different questions like that. So his next step, it seemed to me, that's why I mentioned going to the select board. That should
Yeah, because they're the
I think
ones that
that's
shut us
local
down.
option.
Yeah.
And they can direct the town manager, because presumably the town manager didn't think it was necessary in this case, or
Ever.
probably, or ever, or didn't think about it.
Right.
And so that's his recourse.
Because we've asked multiple times, Rick, at our meetings with Libby, organizational meetings, that we really want our own representation on these stupid appeals.
I think it's a good thing. It's the same thing with Concom, with any other board, where there
Yeah.
might be both
A
parties.
potential conflict.
It gets
No,
a
I
little
think that's right.
dicey, depending
does.
on which way it goes, because who does George represent?
Who are you
does
representing?
John
No.
represent?
Yeah.
We usually end up on the short end of the stick, but it just depends on who you represent.
So I apologize to detain a few minutes, and it feels like we maybe are only at item number 4 so far.
Yes, we're just about to get on to number
We're done
5.
with that
Yes,
now.
okay, well, so I just want, and I apologize being late, but I did want to correct one thing in the minutes. So it has a
Correct.
note saying that Tucker Holland also chimed in that 2 members of the public, Clifford and Teresa Williams, had asked about the committee's ability to create an ombudsman to provide some oversight for the town. So the ombudsman suggestion actually came from the advisory committee of non-voting taxpayers and our
Okay.
guest
Yeah.
here today. So
This is
would
an
like
excellent
the record-
segue.
Yeah.
Please.
I would like
Yes.
the record corrected, because I have not
Sure.
spoken to Clifford or Teresa about that.
Sure.
item.
I have ad nauseum since they're in-laws.
Yeah.
Well, with that,
It was one of the points of.
So we have to move to amend the amended minutes. So moved.
so moved. Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And let's move on to the next item, which is a discussion.
So I think we need to circle back with Lauren on that particular issue
Wait,
again, and say it just continues to come up, and it's broader an issue than just Teresa, and Teresa's with the school committee, Clifford's with the building department, so it's broader than just one
Yep.
problem.
Mr. Sherman.
Just first, a comment goes to Cliff's presentation. The charter, he was asking for whom was the charter cast, and just like the U.S. Constitution, it's we the people, and the whole process was very open, very large committee, town and county charter commission, and it went to town meeting to be adopted after it had been in conformity with state statutes, so it had a long process and so forth.
And everybody got a copy of both of them before they went to town meeting. I believe the town mailed it out to people, didn't we? It got out there somewhere, it was all over the place.
They had a lot of copies around, and amazingly, you know how issues, very simple issues invite a lot of controversy at town meeting. The presentation of the town and county charters, only one comment came up, and that was the amendment that's incorporated to have an audit committee.
Yeah,
So that-
Interesting.
which
the
we're
audit
talking
committee
about again.
language,
That audit committee bill is funny. That audit committee was one of the first things that came up when we started meeting again, was that audit committee thing again.
You know, it's been amended. So I have the underlying question, what does the committee want of me? And Alan and Linda are all comparably representative of that early process. What would be useful?
Well, we would love to just pick your brain as a sort of non-voting taxpayer, how things are, if you have any comments, questions, concerns. You have done your homework better than any other guest we've had to date, in that you have actually redlined the charter, which is a tremendous.
I don't have a copy of that.
I emailed it the other day.
Was that part of the
Computer.
agenda? 'Cause that's the only thing I printed off, okay. Because that's what we wanted to know, is looking at it today with fresh eyes and having your history with this and on the ZBA, if there was anything in there that you thought should be revisited or updated or gotten rid of, given where we are in the process today.
Yeah.
And that's where you can be immeasurably helpful.
Just in a broader sense, there's the question, what's not working well? And in a conversation with Alan, we kicked back and forth the issue of whether the legislative activity of the town is as flexible, as amenable to the needs as it should be. And Town meeting meets once a year, sometimes twice, October 10 is this year. Is that enough legislative frequency and flexibility to meet the needs of the town? And out of that conversation and I had, we came up with the idea, let's look at the county because it's widely empowered with rights to legislate. And so if there were things that the town meeting doesn't really need to deal with because they're pretty perfunctory, they almost always go to the vote at the end and not called and so forth. Why not have some of that stuff go to the county, the Board of County Commissioners? They are the legislative entity for the county. And the county, of course, and town are coextensive. So you can do through the county things that you could also do through the town. In the markup suggested early on to arguably widen what in 2.1 legislative powers.
Under the county or this?
This is on the town charter.
Town side.
On the town side,
The county charter needs a little bit of fine tuning on this issue perhaps. And there's always the question, what would town and county council tell us is the right way to do it? It's just, well, arguably layman's way of thinking, I thought just adding in that notwithstanding some of what the town meeting does could be vested in the Board of County Commissioners. But anything that the county commissioners do in the way of ordinances, the citizens can say, no. If they act in time, they can stop it right there. If they want to, at a later point in the process, they can say, in any event, this should go to town meeting, and we're going to initiate a petition to get it on the warrant of the next town meeting that fits within the time schedule of the county charter. So there's nothing that you would shift to the county in trying to make your legislative process for the town work more effectively that won't potentially come back to town meeting if it's got controversy in it, if it's an issue for voters.
Because you remember, Bill, at the time when we did the county, it was sort of like, oh yeah, we got to do the county. We didn't really shift anything to the county when we did the county charter, because remember, it's like this big.
Well,
At the
roads,
time, it wasn't really the focus.
and yeah, there were certain properties. The whole idea was, when we were initially looking at this, our charge back in the early 90s was how can we improve the efficiency of town meeting, essentially, is what we were looking at.
Yeah.
And I think that was, Curtis is the one who put the initial motion warrant article before the town meeting. And in talking with Bill recently, when we were looking at this, we recognized a couple of things. First of all, having an annual town meeting is not a very efficient way to run any sort of particularly a $100 million operation where you need to make
Quicker decision.
major financial decisions. It just isn't a very efficient way. One of the ways we had suggested would be possibly a representative town meeting, based on area associations and so on. But that was, we determined that given the history of town meeting and the sanctity of the whole process of town meeting, that wasn't going to
The
fly.
insanity of the whole.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Recently then, when Bill and I were discussing this, it was actually Bill's idea, maybe we could delegate some of the items that normally come to the floor of town meeting to the county to really, to essentially energize the county, because right now the county is, they have very limited, the county commissioners have very limited functions, that they've been assigned. So that would be one way to address it through the charter change. Would not be as dramatic because we would still retain annual town meeting, but it might be a way to streamline the process, and that was, I think, what we were aiming for.
This brings me back to my bug about the 4 types of government structure and the town council, town manager thing. And I've been looking at this. I sort of thought when I was here earlier, you all said you didn't even want to talk about that. But in the outline, frequent meetings, ability to move more quickly and all the rest. Is that off the table, town
No.
council, town manager for this group?
Not for me, it's not. I've been on that for, like you, for quite a
I mean,
while.
I just think that smaller, more frequent meetings, getting stuff done makes a lot of sense to me. And an annual town meeting, and then deferring and going to the next annual town meeting, and the one after that is driving me nuts, so.
Well, plus a lot of the towns have gone away from Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
Not necessarily on this
Anyway,
side of the
I'm
canal,
a
but on the other
Town manager,
side.
town council, isn't that what Barnstable has?
Yeah, they've got a city council.
All right, I'm just saying, I don't want to throw this away.
Sure.
No,
Understood.
representative, we did talk about, before you came on, we did talk about
Yeah.
representative.
Yeah,
And we had Suzanne Kennedy in here.
I was at that.
And she's worked for towns where they have that, and
I think that wasn't as exciting, the representative, because that's where you have various areas, of like on Sunset Hill, you'd have a voting rep and 27 reps or something.
there's not a person who lives in Wauwinet.
Yeah, that's why I'm coming back to
Yeah.
the town council,
Sure.
town
Yeah,
manager.
and that's
No, I don't think that's off the table.
Okay,
No.
well, I just want to make sure it's on the table.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Recalling that earlier process of forming the charters, we were told, don't go to representative town
Yeah.
government because you can get very skewed representation. Without wishing to offend anybody, I think the person telling us that was thinking that the representatives could easily be heavily weighted toward town employees because there's so many of them year-round.
In
and so forth.
Mid-Island, yeah.
And then the town government might be run really disproportionately in favor of the benefit
The
of
inmates are running.
employees.
The asylum, yeah.
But from my viewpoint, you look at the federal, look at state, any expression of democracy in this country, only a few participate, or relatively few, and it makes a big difference. But those few at least are motivated to vote, and they have a buy-in. They have at least philosophically, if not psychologically, an ownership of the results. This is my government. I voted for it.
Right.
And I'm sorry it turned out the way it turned out, but we're human, and we're not very far along in the evolutionary process. So that would be my comment on open meeting. On the comment you're making, Kurt, I think there's a certain wisdom in taking shorter steps if you can, rather than going to town council or town manager form or something that's
What would be a shorter step from? what we
shorter
got?
step is like we're talking about, what Alan and I are talking about, getting that, the value of a town council kind of government out of our county. Right now, we hardly use we have not had no ordinances passed by the county since the charter was enacted.
It's ludicrous.
I don't know how they
They do
function,
roads,
but that's their main thing to do. They can have ordinances or resolutions, and as far as I know, they've not had any resolutions. But and one of the problems when we took on the process of getting charters for town and county was the county was really loosey-goosey. You'd never know whether you were sitting at a meeting of the county or the town.
And different leadership, because
somebody-
you vote the
that's
chair
something
of
that
the
comes so
select board, and someone else gets voted chair of the county board.
Yeah, they reverse
Yeah,
it.
that was one of our concepts,
Yeah.
that we didn't want
Have
the
the same
same
people.
bloke to be
Yeah, right.
the head
Yeah.
of both.
Right, but then the question is, if you transfer stuff to the a new county board, is the person who leads that the person that you want leading the select board, or?
Or we elect the whole county.
Well, it's just,
Rick-
where's the stronger
Rick might
leadership?
be able to tell you whether the dynamics work well or not between the town
Just thinking
Board of
out loud.
Selectmen, or Select Board, and the County Board of Commissioners, the Board of County Commissioners.
Well, I think until you get behind the general statement here, which there are a lot of issues, since we don't have any idea what kind of responsibilities we're talking about at the moment, and maybe you have a list, but it says section 2.8, which I gather is a new section. So we'll have to go through this in some heavy detail.
Yeah.
Just a couple things hit me quickly. First of all, I think we all know the state has eliminated, I don't know how many counties, 5 counties from existence, period. And they would have eliminated us, except that we fought like hell, primarily related to the deeds excise tax and how that money would be allocated to pay for this thing we're in now. Absent that, we might not have a county, and that could happen any time. So I think whether or not it's a good idea to give powers to an entity that is subject to a state legislative vote to eliminate is something you ought to think about. Also, the county, in terms of what it has been doing, has been working hard to get rid of, that's not the right phrase, to transfer any title of roads to the town, primarily because of the same issue that the state might, I think I'm right on that, Alan, because the state has interests in things that we may not have, and you don't want, the town, I think, would rather be in charge of its own roads as opposed to the county. Now, there are some things that the county can do already. What is it, a takings issue, for example? And so we ought to go through what powers the county currently has and understand those, because they are broader than what the town has. And you ought to start with that before you allocate something else to it.
And I'd love to see a side-by-side.
Yeah, you could, but it's...
Chart that would
right.
outline that, make it easy for
So you
simple
get at the
guys to
issues.
understand.
I think it would be, you really got to think this through. So the Board of Selectmen, I guess you could have a separate county commission
Yep.
election, Linda, but whether you really want to do that. And I'm not sure how that would really function, and then it's not even like a Barnstable structure. You're talking about 5 people, and in effect, 3 people control the vote. And so what are those responsibilities you want to transfer them? And the only way that people can respond is they have to then have a petition, which they can do now, I think, when it's on acquisition or disposition of property. Citizens can petition and say you're selling it for the wrong number or something. There are a couple petition rights in here, but not many. Anyway, 3 people is a small number of people to be influenced by whomever.
If we had a council, you'd have a...
You have, I think Barnstable has 13.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at.
Well, I understand, we can get to that issue, but that's not what this is saying.
All right, understood.
Okay.
Well, what I'm curious about, though, Rick, is I remember we fought really hard for them to back off, because we are one of the only places which is the town and the county are the same entity,
Right.
same area. Is if we beefed up the county, as Bill and Alan are saying, it would be even more resistant at the state to get rid of it.
It could be. You got to really think through. I mean, I'm not sure I'm for or against this kind of thing, but it's, the county is not the town. And we're sort of saying the town has the power to delegate whatever, since we don't know what those are right now. It's hard to understand whether the town should really delegate them to another party. They could delegate them to whom? Does it only allow them to delegate them to the town? Maybe they should delegate all their land to the land bank. I'm just talking out loud, for example. So anyway, just a little odd.
I think it's a really interesting.
Because
is.
you're sort of
The town meeting.
delegating up, almost in the structure, you sort of think as a county, like Barnstable County, in theory, is above the towns on the Cape. That doesn't quite work that way. But Barnstable County does have some powers that they use across their territory that the towns may not have. And I think some of them often have to do with health issues where counties have more traditionally dealt with, hospitals and health issues than towns. So I'm not sure that's the case in Barnstable, but it's likely to be. But I think you'd find it hard pressed to find any community on the on the Cape saying, I'll send my stuff up to the county of Barnstable. They'd say, no, thank you. We're one and the same. So it's clearly different, but the structural issues are somewhat similar.
So I'm just interested in, Alan and Bill, what your perspective is on this. And I'm not bringing it up because I think it's a good idea necessarily, but it's something that has been brought up, and sort of a Curtis's interim or smaller step question. I can't remember if it was Susan Kennedy or one of the other folks who came in, but the idea of, I think they call it an Australian ballot, where you actually have a town meeting, all of the discussion that would happen at a regular town meeting happens, but there's no voting. And the voting occurs the next day at the ballot box. So it kind of allows for expression of opinion and advocacy through the discussion process, but it allows for potentially, the theory is, I guess, greater participation in the actual voting, because you wouldn't have to attend a 4-hour meeting necessarily if you felt you were informed
Yeah,
on
you
the
could
issues.
skip A and go to B.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
And it's
reasons
also,
why I don't
it
like
would
that.
be, it sounds like in
Well, I don't want to
theory-
debate whether it's good. I just am interested with all your background. You had a first
In
perspective.
theory, it sounds like the initial thought is that second is like a ballot vote, so it's all private,
Yes.
which I also find interesting. So,
Just a comment on Rick's, my perspective that I got back in those ancient days is just the opposite, that if you want the state not to take over our county, if you think the county has some benefits because there are so few in the state and you aren't competing with, what is it, 400 or whatever, the way to keep the state from taking over Nantucket, or abolishing Nantucket County, which it can do, is to fill it up with ownership of roads as much as you can, because the state won't want to take over responsibility of maintaining all those roads on Nantucket. We'd be smart to have the county own all the dirt roads on the island. For example, just as a way of saying you don't want the state to take over the county. And the other thing to do is to make the county an active element of managing our shared life. If there are things it can do that are useful, and that takes a lot of the detailed, I'm not up for analysis.
That was my point about beef it up. They can't get rid of it.
well, maybe right. Look, I may be wrong in my impression, but sort of being there for a while, that's my general feeling that, but you have to find out, talk to Libby,
Right.
Yeah,
Talk
they
to
haven't
me.
come back at
Talk
us.
to town council. It's an interesting thought. I think until you fill it out, maybe you imply that any bonding authority and capital expenditure authority up to $100 million would be embedded in the county commissioners, and a vote of 3 could get the town underway. It's timely, efficient, no problem. I'm exaggerating to make the point. So until you start enumerating what you're talking about, it's a little hard to react.
No, I fully understand that. In fact, when Bill and I were talking about this, we were trying to identify, well, what are some of the powers that we could delegate to the county? And, other than sort of tinkering at the edges right now. Initially, as Bill said, when we were writing the town and then the town and county charters, we had to form a whole separate commission to do that. We wrote the 2 charters so they were intermeshed like this. We wanted to be sure that one didn't complicate the other. And as Bill said, we designated, I think the only properties, the courthouse and the private roads, we would, if they ever decided to take it, let them maintain the dirt roads around Nantucket. But you're absolutely right. We would need to come up with a list of what we would be delegating to this county authority. And until, we have some sort of ideas to, how that would work.
Right.
Yeah, that's the real basis for whether or not this is possible.
Right, if you go to our town meeting, look at, so we got all the budget junk up front, and we just usually blow right through those, except for a couple of items.
It's stuck
Then you got all the zoning things, and
And
then
you don't
got
blow
the-
through it, you drag it out forever, 3 nights.
Well,
We didn't have that many in this year. We
Not
didn't.
this year.
We didn't,
Last
on
anyway,
purpose.
so, I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, we'll have to think about which of those you want kicked upstream,
Exactly.
and
The
not
whole
have
end
the
of
people
the whole of the
participate on it.
warrant. Remember all that stuff at the end of the warrant? And go
Yeah.
to the county. There's
Well,
like
that's
20
what-
things at the end of the warrant. We rarely discuss them,
I understand, so some
but
of
they're on
them,
there.
yeah, well, you gotta look at what they are. So there's some home rule petitions at the end, there's some property issues at the end,
Paper roads.
and, maybe you don't care about the property issues, but, usually some people are vitally interested in those property issues, and they're nervous about 3 selectmen doing something.
Is there a reason why the warrant is structured the way it is? Could some of the more interesting stuff at the end be pushed up?
The board can change the order of the articles at
Yeah, I
their
just
will.
wonder why they don't. I mean, it just
They've
seems,
talked about it forever, and then they just sort of, I was there, and just sort of say, is it worth the incredible amount of energy to decide which one you want to move up? And there's already a little bit of that, Curtis. There's some articles that clearly ought to come before others, because if they're approved, the others are moot, and so on. So there's some of that already.
But they've been doing that warrant 45 years I've been here, and I've been to every town meeting. They've been setting that warrant up the same damn way all that time. The financials at the front, Article 10, Article 8, then zoning, then all the land stuff. Now, zoning usually ends up with 230 people making a decision for the rest of the island.
Right.
We've asked for years to have that stuff put up farther. So it's the same first night as everything else, and you don't go to the second night, because you get it over with. I mean, not in front of Article 8 and Article 10, but just right there. None of this other foo-foo stuff, and get zoning with the amount of people in the audience that it's going to affect. We are constantly screwed up by people who hate zoning on the second or third night and going to vote against everything, even if it's for the benefit.
Yep.
That's why we have a 40B on South Shore Road, okay? Because that ended up at the end. There is a reason for the stuff to be worked around when you already know how difficult some of these are going to be, and they're just laying out there for the second and third night, so 200 people make a decision for another 50,000.
In terms of the charter, the only constraint that's introduced is 2.5A, which is town meeting warrant section. The select board shall include all proposed operating expenditures in a single article or in consecutive articles in the warrant, and also all proposed capital improvement expenditures in a single article or in consecutive articles, which is to say, there's very little constraint, but even that might be something that you want to free up. Put the articles in whatever order the select board wants, might be the smartest way.
I mean, I don't think I'd have a problem with moving them around, or some people think pull them out of a hat so that people, might have to be there until
Oh,
they get
God,
the
no,
ones.
they'd kill us for
Well, I'm
that.
just telling you, there are lots of discussions about how to do it, so.
But as far as the warrant, as far as the charter is concerned, that's all I think of that might be a constraint.
So do you have any reaction to that Australian ballot thing?
It's an interesting concept. I would want to know more about how it's worked in the past and what the implications are. But it's an intriguing idea.
The reason why I had an issue with it, food for thought, is that if you look at who goes to the polls and who goes to town meeting, they are vastly different people. We have people who go vote, whatever, the following week, which are totally different people who will never miss a vote, but they will not go to town meeting to get educated about what it is.
Right.
People read that warrant and they're like, I don't think it's going to work here, because they don't understand what it is they're voting on. It may actually keep people from going to the polls because they don't understand what they're voting on, because they didn't go to town meeting. If you're like 90 years old and you want to go vote, but you didn't want to go sit there for 5 torturous hours, there are different people that go vote. I know, I'm standing out there a lot, and I know who's at town meeting, and I know who goes to vote, because it's the
Well, you're talking
totally
about
different people.
the basic concept of democracy here. So.
Yeah, so whoever wants to go wherever they want to go, but you don't
Yeah.
rely on the people that are at town meeting to
We
be the
start-
ones that are going to vote the next day.
Our country started out with the idea that only the educated voters,
Could vote.
the
Right.
property owners and so forth, should have a right to vote. Are we going in the wrong direction or the right direction? May I
Who knows about
move us along to the question of appointments? The charter doesn't have to be changed, but you could certainly recommend that when the time comes for appointments, June or whatever, a lot of that appointment power could go delegated to the town manager, because it's just non-controversial and it needs to be professional and carefully thought and so forth.
No, that's actually, there's been some problems with that.
Depoliticized to some extent.
Actually, Bill, it's become more politicized in
Yeah,
a
you
couple of
might,
cases.
so
You
some
don't want to
people,
do
Bill, would
that.
say when you have one person, it's more politicized.
It's more politicized right now with a couple of these appointments than you ever want to know.
But any appointment that the town manager makes is subject to no coming from the Board of Select Board.
Except, Bill, in this case, they didn't know in time.
Yeah, you talking
They
about
have
Park and Rec?
15 days
Yeah,
or
I would
something
too.
like
That's a
that.
They
perfect
didn't know in
example.
time.
And the appointment was made, and the board was not notified in time to exercise their authority if
Yeah.
they chose to.
So
it
that's,
doesn't always
I'm
work.
for taking everything away from town manager and making it, because the selectmen have 2 jobs, setting policy and making appointments. And I think the selectmen need, the people that we elect need to be the ones making all the appointments, period. Because we all appear before that. There's no appearance before Libby.
The impression I have is that the Select Board has a lot of stuff that, where it should be looking at the broadest kinds of issues about where the island's going. If
But they only
that's
do it
not-
once a year.
If we want them to hang into every little detail, that's another thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Bill, I just have to take a little bit exception. There are a lot of detailed things they should get out of. I totally agree. I think the appointment of people to commissions is not a little detail. It is-
Many of them are
it
very
sets-
important.
It sets the policy tone
Yep.
for the town of Nantucket overall and within many specific areas. So I just don't want the record to reflect that as the point of view of our commission until we agree with that.
And the selectmen need to take responsibility for appointing good people or bad people. We've had some problems with this, so I'm of the mind to put it in the charter that the selectmen do all appointments, period.
Well, that's pretty much the way it reads now.
Except that they've
No,
delegated 5 of them.
They can delegate.
They can delegate.
They can
I don't wanna
delegate any
delegate.
appointment within their current authority they choose to do so.
And they've got 5 with Libby right now.
Going back to Tucker's comment, the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers is long talks, talk, about how they're not being represented in town meeting. They pay all this money, 80% of the residential tax levy and so forth. And as you may know, the reason the committee was formed was that the exemption was raised up to 20% by the Board of Selectmen at that time. And that fried many of them, and they started saying about, I'm not going to give the Conservation Foundation, the hospital and all. So we're there to help in my view, we're there to help the fellow residents know that the town, the year-round people have a lot of problems. They need help financially and so forth. They need as much exemption from the tax burden as state law allows. But everybody else on the committee, except me, feels the other way around, keep the taxes low. So the thought is they wanted to have a representation at town meeting. We got it into the charter. They didn't appoint anybody to show up at town meeting except Howard Blitman a couple of times.
Yeah.
And so I think it was David Worth said, that's too late in the process. If you want to influence what the town undertakes at town meeting, you've got to be at least at the level where the FinCom is dealing with the issue, or earlier if you can.
When it comes up.
So, talking with Tucker in an earlier ACNBT meeting, the question of ombudsman came up, of having somebody on the town administration staff whose job is to listen to ACNBT types, listen to people in the community that ACNBT can't really represent because we're only 10, 15 people. And there are a lot of wealthy people that aren't going to have anything to do with that little committee who care about how the town is run. So that point person, in my mind, might be the communications officer, which is a newly formed job, I think.
We don't know who's doing it right now, do we? Who's doing the communications after Jason had to quit?
My guess is it's by default with Francesca.
Probably.
Florenzi, thanks.
Well, it's his successor.
Names are much.
There's a successor before he went up to the select board. Anyway, that's the thought.
That would
And
be interesting, because you'd be sort of outreach to you guys.
and the only way it's touched on in the markup that I sent around was that, what is it, 2.6 or something like that.
I like your large print there, Bill.
Summer resident has a right to ask the town moderator to have a voice and so forth. Yeah, 2.6.
Okay.
Such spokesperson at the annual town meeting may be a member of town administration staff designated to represent such non-resident property owners, just a place saver. It's not perhaps the
Right.
way to do it, but it's just a way of
It's an
putting the
interesting
idea out
concept,
there.
it is.
Well, Sarah allows, if somebody lets her know before the meeting, because we've done this with
Richmond.
with all kinds of projects. They're not voters. They can sit down front. She has to know where they are. And she says that you notify Sarah before the meeting that there is someone who's not a voter who wishes to speak on town meeting floor, and she will allow them to speak. She's been doing that all
It
along.
doesn't say who it has to be. It
Right.
doesn't have to be the ACNVT.
Anybody who notifies
And Sarah was just terrific with that, Wickler, is that the right name? Article
Dickler.
came up, and she was
Dickler.
really trying to get us guys to respond. Well, we couldn't have a meeting, open meeting law and so forth.
Right.
And I told them earlier about this article, but they waited till the absolute last minute to get exercised and upset, and
No, I got-
unfortunately,
As
they
they
I
do.
got about 20 phone calls the day before town
there
meeting.
weren't very many favorable votes on that article.
Now, Bill, is this an official thing that would have to be under the open meeting law? No. This is an association of you guys, right?
ACNVT is a bylaw, Nantucket Code
Okay, so it
Committee,
is under the open
and-
meeting law.
and
Okay.
so it
So otherwise
takes
you
town
can do
meeting
whatever you
to
want.
get rid of it,
Gotcha.
so far.
Hmm.
Okay.
Thanks.
And,
So, just, Bill, go back to make sure I understand what I missed what section that you thought that might...
2.6.
2.6, and is the idea to incorporate a position within the charter?
No,
Well, I sort of
the
missed...
charter doesn't have to say anything about it.
Okay,
It's just encouraging Libby to give it as an extra duty, not an extra person, but an
Right.
extra duty for
yeah, okay, I
somebody
got
who's
you, I just...
doing communications.
Just want to be
Well,
clear.
they were supposed to have some sort of an outreach communications person that got
There's somebody
information
on
out.
board
Yeah,
already.
and that would probably be a good place to go with this. Cool.
Okay, I have to excuse myself. I have
Yeah, I
a 12
think
o'clock
I-
meeting in
okay.
town, so
Good luck, you're not gonna make it.
Don't go past the front of the Marine Lumber. I don't know why there's people always slow down, you know, like there's signs on the highway that says traffic ahead. There's no reason why there's traffic ahead, there's just traffic ahead, and everybody slows down, and then there's no traffic. It's like going past the front of Marine Lumber. We all have to slow down and stop. There's no traffic.
Not this
You get
morning.
past Marine Lumber to come, there's no traffic.
Bill, thank you very much for coming.
We want to
Really
keep in
appreciate
touch
it.
with
Yes.
you.
Including the two of us, I appreciate it.
Keep going with what you're doing with this thing.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah,
And
'cause
you
this-
do know that the Bill
consistent.
Sherman who died was in the paper today. He was a dentist.
People keep asking me if it was you.
No, it was a dentist. It's in,
I decided not to die.
And we appreciate
I was
that.
gonna say, the reports of your demise are greatly exaggerated.
You know, he's the same age I am.
Yeah,
Really?
people are going, what? Did Bill die? Not, I just saw you.
well, the obit's in today's paper, big obit, and he gave a lot of money to Tufts, which is good.
Okay, I'll read it with
Go Jumbos.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you
we're
again.
glad you're here, Bill.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys have the task we have.
Thank you.
All right, so, next item of business is a timeline for the fall. Yeah, I don't know if, I don't know that I want to bring this up. but-
Second Tuesdays of each month afternoon.
I'd rather not be Tuesdays. but-
Okay, I don't care.
Well, it's not Thursdays, I don't,
Well, that's why I'm saying Tuesdays.
What's wrong with Thursday?
ZBA in the afternoon. I mean, if we do it in the
Oh,
morning, it's
yeah,
okay.
well, understand, we are also going to lose access to this room.
How about Mondays? No, I don't know.
We can meet over at our room if nobody's over there at
Yeah.
the two fairgrounds.
Why are we going to lose access here?
Because they're kicking all the boards out, the HDC,
Oh.
everybody.
Why?
Because the fire department and the police department decided that they want to have this as the training room.
Oh, I think I knew that somewhere in the recesses of my brain. Okay,
So we'd have to move over to our room, which is fine. because
which is
this
fine, we
our
can,
room.
You could also move to the water company as a room.
Yeah,
there's
we're
an
right there.
idea.
That's pretty
Or-
cool, and there's a lot of parking there.
True.
Yeah, and what the hell, we paid a lot of money for that new house.
We certainly did.
I think it was
Let's
the most
use it.
expensive building ever
Oh, I know.
per square foot.
Really?
FinCom said something like that.
Well, and I love the fact that they raised the rates in the summer. More volume at lower unit cost. Not here, more volume, higher unit cost. They've
Well, it's
got a
like-
scam that's going for,
Well, it's like Memorial Day, they're following the Stop and Shop. It's like Memorial Day in the gas stations. Memorial Day comes around, milk is now $4 a gallon, and gas is now $4.50 a gallon. And usually they go down after like Columbus Day.
All right, do you want me to, since we're missing Christie, and do we know when Richard's coming back?
Not for a
Yeah.
long time. Don't even count on it.
is there something I don't know about Richard?
He's been in the hospital for 2 months and ICU for over a month.
Oh, my goodness.
Pancreatitis, and then everything else went.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And they just took him out of ICU last week or the week before, I think. And he's then going to be transferred at some point. If they can stabilize him, they'll be transferring him to rehab. He hasn't walked in 2 months. I mean, he's going to be in rehab for, God
Should
knows,
he
at least another
resign
month.
and allow for another appointment?
I don't want to bring that up with Edie yet,
Yeah.
because wasn't even compos mentis for like 6 weeks. I don't know what his mental capacity is right now, since his body was filled with so many toxins. I don't know. I keep up with what's going on with her through somebody else, and I actually saw her, so I asked her.
We'll keep that on the back burner.
Yeah,
That's the idea.
I wouldn't kick him to the curb just yet.
With that being said, I mean, I know Christie emailed me right before the meeting saying that she had a meeting that was running late, so she wasn't going to be able to make it today.
Well, she's also working at the chamber now, which is a little more difficult for her to get out if we
Okay.
don't keep it sort of around 11 or 12
Okay.
for her lunch hour kind of thing. So you probably should email her.
Yeah, why don't we?
Does she work at the chamber now?
Yes.
I saw her up there.
I would think the chamber
He
would
should
work.
let
Yeah,
her
David would
release
let her,
time.
for
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But we've been meeting at lunchtime anyway, which
Yeah.
works for a lot of people because it's like in between things.
Do you want me to try to schedule this via email, and we can put something
Fine.
firm via email rather than
But
us
you're
doing it
saying
here?
Thursday's no good.
Well, if we don't meet in here, we're not going to be meeting in the same
I
place.
think historically, you brought up Monday, I think we had been meeting
We
on
were doing Mondays.
Yeah, so like, should we use?
Whatever.
Mondays is often an off day.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
people, you know,
Yeah.
And so that's one to think about.
Like
Okay.
Mondays at 1:30, if that ends up.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we can meet over at our building. But if we're going to Mondays or Tuesdays, we have our advisory groups are over there.
think
I don't know what
The water
time, the one
Try the
on,
water company.
Okay,
They
all
may
right.
have a
Yeah.
camera too, so we should
Okay.
check.
Oh, that's a good- that's a good-
part of our
that's a good
yeah,
responsibility.
because we
Okay.
don't have one over there at
If they
the
don't, they ought to
two
get
fairgrounds.
one.
Yeah,
They
definitely.
got
Yep.
plenty of money.
Without charge us more.
Yeah.
That's not good, crazy. Okay, I will send something out, but we'll plan on meeting in early September.
And so a public hearing in October
That'd be
after
nice.
special town meeting?
Yeah, why don't we
I
get
mean,
on
we really
that?
gotta have
I know
one.
we do. I know, that's the next thing that we have
We can make
to.
an announcement at town meeting that we're moving along,
Yeah.
and we're going to be asking for public input, and please be on the lookout in the paper for, you
Well,
know,
you could,
public
that's a good
meetings.
place to
Yeah, maybe have,
advertise.
maybe have Sarah do it, or,
Yeah, and we make an
Announce it, yeah.
announcement there.
okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at noon sharp.
Thank you kindly. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Terrific. Thank you all.